Hello everyone and welcome to Poser's Full Movie Recaps. Our today's movie is a psychological thriller drama film, which tells the origin story of the infamous villain Hannibal Lecter. In 1941, an 8-year-old Hannibal happily lives in Lithuania with his family. He has a close relationship with his sister Misha, but when the German invasion of the Soviet Union turns their area into one of the bloodiest front lines, Hannibal's family has to flee. They stay at the family's hunting lodge in the woods for 3 years, until the Germans are finally driven out of their country. One day during the German retreat, a group of Soviet Union soldiers stops by their lodge to ask for some water. When they see a German plane flying over, they start to shoot while the Germans return firing. They are able to destroy a Soviet tank, but Hannibal's family gets killed in the process, and all that is left is Hannibal and his sister Misha. A few days later, a group of rogue soldiers led by a German collaborator named Grudas finds the lodge. When they see that there are only 2 young kids living inside, they decide to stay and use them as hostages, as all roads are blocked. As days pass by, the food supplies dwindled and the men start to starve and fight with each other. They even eat a rotten squirrel, but then they stare menacingly at Hannibal and Misha. The group has 2 choices at the time: they eat or they die, and they choose to live. 8 years later, Lecter lives in his former family castle, which has been converted into an orphanage. He doesn't talk much and often screams at night, which makes him a subject for some bullies. After dealing with them harshly, he takes some old family letters from a drawer and slips into the night to escape. Hannibal sneaks a ride to a train and tries to find his widowed aunt, Lady Murasaki, in Paris. He learns that his uncle passed away a year ago, but his aunt still took him in. He continues to have night terror about Misha, while he still flourishes as a student with his aunt's encouragement and support. She teaches him various stuff, from flower arrangement, cultures that her ancient ancestor practiced from Japan, and fighting. Eventually, Hannibal starts to relax and open up more to his aunt. One day, while walking in the market with Lady Murasaki, a butcher named Vichy spews some insult to his aunt's heritage, and Hannibal gets upset with this. He tries to beat the man to defend her honor, while his aunt stops another man who is about to attack him from his back. When the police arrive, the two get sent to the station to give some statement on what happened. Inspector Popple explains that the butcher was once a collaborator with the German occupation, and was known to be hated by many. The same night, Hannibal hears Miss Murasaki praying for revenge and mistakes it for her wanting to get revenge on the butcher. She's in fact praying for Hannibal to get some peace, because she knows that the young man is troubled. He starts preparing for vengeance, takes his aunt's blade, and puts on a cultural mask. The next day while Vichy is fishing, Hannibal waits for him on land. When the man shows up, Hannibal demands an apology but the butcher threatens him instead. The two start fighting, but Hannibal gains the upper hand because he is faster than the man. After butchering the guy, Hannibal takes his fish and goes back home. When the police start investigating the butcher's death, Hannibal becomes a suspect because of the altercations at the market. That night, Miss Murasaki finds the head of the butcher at her homemade altar, where she usually prays. She gets startled when Hannibal suddenly shows up with her blade, but the young man doesn't intend to hurt her and returns the blade to its former place. The police inspector soon arrives, and his aunt asks Lecter to wash his hands thoroughly. Inspector Popple invites the young man to the station so he can be questioned, and Hannibal undergoes a lie detector test and he beats the machine with flying colors. The technician and the investigator thought it monstrous not to react to anything because that is how Hannibal's result shows. Popple starts questioning him further and asks about the fish he takes home that night. Hannibal makes up some excuses, and the inspector tries to get some more reaction from him, by sharing that he lost his family too during the war. But this doesn't deter Hannibal, and with Lady Murasaki's intervention as she leaves the butcher's head at the front gate of the station, Lecter escapes the responsibility for the crime. Later, Hannibal learns that his aunt's house is getting auctioned because of some financial reason. At the same time, he gets admitted as the youngest student to enter medical school in France. When Lady Murasaki gets evicted from her house, she comes to live with him in Paris. While in school, Hannibal is under a work scholarship, meaning that he must spend most of his spare time working on preparing cadavers for the anatomy class. He's fascinated with his studies, and completely absorbs anything he has to learn. But his past still haunts him at night, especially the loss of his young sister Misha. He tells Miss Murasaki that he has to search for answers about Misha, since he was too young to remember everything that happened at the time. One day, while witnessing a condemned war criminal receiving a sodium thiopental injection, which allows him to recall his war crimes, Hannibal gets an idea. He injects himself with the same concoction, allowing himself to remember every name uttered during his time with the soldiers at his family lodge. He remembers one of the men saying that Misha has pneumonia and she was taken and never seen again. He also recalls that they ate a stew after his sister was gone, and one of the soldiers collecting all the dog tags when the roof of the lodge falls on top of him, and how the Russians rescued him. Hannibal decides to go back to his family lodge to further investigate, but while at the border, he has to show his passport to the officer. One of the original soldiers that were with Lecter at the lodge is now a border officer, who sees Hannibal's name from the day's entry and remembers the lodge. Meanwhile, Lecter reaches his family's old cabin and starts to search in the ruins. He finds his mother's jewelry hidden on a previously mounted animal, and the dog tags containing the names of the 6 soldiers. The border officer Dortlick watches him from the dark, and tries to attack Hannibal from his back, but the young man senses him and incapacitates the Dortlick. When Lecter finds his sister's remains, he gave her a proper burial before confronting Dortlick. He questions him about the location of the others from the group, and he tells him that the one named Grentz is in Canada while the others are dead. He eventually gives up Kalnaz's location, but after Hannibal deals with him, he leaves his head on a tree trunk, with half the dog tag in his mouth. When the police investigates, they found evidence that someone ate some meat from his cheeks and spiced it with mushrooms. Hannibal returns to France and tells Miss Murasaki that he found them and they are currently here in France. The two ride his aunt's motorcycle to Fontainebleau, the location he got from Dortlick. Lecter and Miss Murasaki visit the restaurant to locate Kalnaz and find his young daughter wearing Misha's bracelet. He sneaks Kalnaz's dog tag into her coat, which is eventually seen by her father. Even Miss Murasaki expresses her reluctance on their plans because of the children, but Hannibal is very determined, especially after seeing the bracelet. Kalnaz informs the rest of the soldiers of Hannibal's existence and turns out that Grudas has some illegal business at the dock. Dortlick's murder puts the rest of the group on the alert, and Grudas asks Milko to go to Paris to find Hannibal. With the similarity of Dortlick and the butcher's death, Lecter also goes under suspicion among the police, especially Inspector Popple. Inspector Popple shows up where Miss Murasaki lives, and asks for Lecter since he is not around. He warns the woman of the possibility of arresting Hannibal which may end under the guillotine. He then goes to investigate Lecter's apartment, and finds some incriminating clues about the young man's involvement with Dortlick's death. Meanwhile, Milko follows Lecter to the university, while he's been working late at his job. Milko doesn't know that the man is aware of his presence, and Lecter corners him inside the laboratory. He injects him with something that makes Milko lose consciousness, and when he wakes, he is strapped inside the huge tank of embalming chemicals. Before he drowns, he tells Lecter where Gruda's house is. When Hannibal exits the room, he finds Popple snooping around and starts intimidating him. He brought Lecter to the police station, to record him for his deposition. Hannibal tells the police how Gruda's group eats his sister, and after his story, Popple encourages Lecter to arrest the group legally and not by his hands. After the young man leaves, Popple talks to his colleague and tells him that Lecter will lead them to Gruda's, so they can arrest him. He adds that Hannibal's heart died with Misha back in 1944, and all that is left now is some kind of monster. Back at Miss Murasaki's home, the woman tries to convince Lecter to stop, but he just replies that he can't because he wants revenge. He sneaks back to his lab in the middle of the night, to destroy Milko's remains at the incinerator, and to create some kind of bomb. He proceeds to slip into Gruda's house and plants a bomb. When he cornered Gruda's in his bathroom, one of the maids inside calls the guards and captures Lecter. But when the bomb he planted activates, it is able to distract the guards and he escapes. Grudas quickly commands his guard to call Kalnaz, while Lecter goes back into his aunt's house and finds her missing. When he picks up the phone, Grudas is on the other side threatening the life of his aunt, while Lady Murasaki intentionally bumps into the bird's cage to alert Lecter of her location. Grudas demands to hand him everything that Hannibal has about his group, including the dog tags, pot watchers, and all the evidence he gathers against them. What the groups don't know is that Lecter figures out that they are at Kalnaz's restaurant, due to the bird's sound. He prepares to rescue his aunt, but Grudas move her to the docks. Hannibal finds Kalnaz and threatens his family to disclose the location of Grudas. After he gives up Grudas's location, he calls his wife and learns that his daughter is safe while sleeping at home. Turns out that Hannibal tricks him, and he leaves a gun on a table to see if Kalnaz will try to grab it. Kalnaz did, but Lecter is faster and he stabs him. Hannibal goes to find Gruda's houseboat and sneaks inside. He locates the room where Lady Murasaki is being held, but as he enters the room, Grudas shoots him in his back. The blade he put at his back earlier saves him, and Hannibal cuts his tendon immobilizing him. After freeing Lady Murasaki, Lecter asks Grudas for the location of the remaining soldier, but the man taunts him that he too ate the broth made with Misha. This enrages Lecter and he starts screaming and carving Misha's initials into Grudas. Lady Murasaki tries to convince him to stop and give Grudas to Popple, but Hannibal continues. Finally disturbed by his behavior, Lady Murasaki flees from him, even after he tells her that he loves her. Lecter eviscerates Grutas and burns the houseboat, while everyone thinks that he perishes with it. He emerges in the woods and goes to find the final member of the group in Canada, before moving to the United States. Thank you for watching today's film. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more future full movie recaps.